So what we have here is a gigantic piece of butternut. All right, so both sides of our wall hanging have been filled with the UV resin. Let's hope we got all of it, but I'm sure that we didn't. So I'm just going to take a few finishing cuts, and then I'm going to decide on if I'm going to groove this or leave it the way it is. Still undecided. Hi everybody, it's Jim from Sprague Woodturning. This is the continuation of the butternut wall hanging. If you haven't seen the first video, I would really suggest going back and watching the first video. That way you have an idea how we got to where we are in this video. One of the things you may notice different is the audio. I'm using a new mic from Rode, and I was getting a lot of feedback through my headset microphone that I was using. So it'd be interesting to see in the comments what you think about this audio setup that I'm using right now. And of course, as I learn new things through editing and shooting film, I'm always trying to give you a better product. So please let me know in the comments down below if you like the audio setup that you're hearing here today. So to refresh your memory, I had to go back and actually look myself where this ended. But it was after the second filling with the UV resin, and I'm using the Phoenix here to trim that away. There are still a number of problem areas that are still going to have to be addressed. But that small little cutter on the Phoenix allows you to get in close to these beads. So the only thing that probably would be close to it that I would be, quite comfortable using would be the #1 Hercules. But I like the length of this tool. It's a more robust tool, even though it's got a finer point on it. But there's some other areas. And as you can see, I left a little mark on the tool rest. So I know that is where I got to work. So if you got a little bit of dust on your tool, sometimes it's actually to your benefit. Just kind of tap it lightly on your tool rest, and you know that that's the area that you need to go back and address. I'd also like to take the time to thank those who commented on the thumbnail question that I asked. And that is, basically, do you want a finished thumbnail? Do you want a thumbnail that leaves a lot of mystery? Or do you want kind of, something in between? So I figured that it would go this way, and pretty much the overwhelming majority want to see a finished thumbnail. And, the valid point with all of this is that for new people to subscribe to your channel, and, I'm not talking just about my channel, I'm talking about others that may be listening that want to be, content creators here for YouTube. I think that a finished thumbnail is going to drive more traffic to your channel than an unfinished thumbnail. But I also realize that the people that are familiar with my work might want some mystery. So I totally get that as well. So, and there's lots of great comments where people like it, I wouldn't care if there was a thumbnail at all. I would watch your video. So I really appreciate that. And thanks for everybody for chiming in and let me know your thoughts on what should be the thumbnail. So there, we're getting closer. You can see there's less and less tear out on the inside of that bar that's there. So now I'm working on the outer end, and so far so good. I can't remember how many times I've got to fill this, but this is not the last filling, that's for sure. So there's basically what it looks like after its initial trimming from the second UV filling. And, for the most part, I'm pretty happy with it. The end grain is cut very cleanly, as you can see. So still got more filling to do, just like I figured I would. Just, wishful thinking. Anyway, I'll fill this and then I'll be back. I've already done the back side. I'm not going to show that again because it is the back side. So anyway, I'll fill this and then I'll be back. I don't know if you picked up any of that audio, but my self-powered respirator, the Trend Air Shield Pro, is actually beeping, and it lets you know that your battery is going to die. The thing is that beeping will go on for quite a substantial amount of time before the battery actually dies. So it's one of these things that I find irritating about it. You know, just give me 30 seconds worth of beeping. That's really all I need. I don't think I need any more than that. But I've never really measured it, but you could probably go, I would say 10, 15 minutes before the battery actually dies. So, you know, this is after yet another filling. And I am going to be looking for a different respirator. This one here, I've had to change the batteries in it every year at over $100 each. And you have to have two batteries. If you have long turning sessions and don't have a second battery, you won't be able to use your respirator. So yeah, after 10 minutes or so, that little beeping gets irritating. I understand why it's there. The problem is that, you know, when your batteries are brand new, then, you know, you can probably go all day on a brand new battery. But, you know, as they tend to die off throughout the year, then I find that sometimes the charge time, because I have a battery cradle that the other battery sits in and being charged, sometimes I find that it's just not adequate enough. So I try to stretch the batteries as long as I can. That way, you know, I've got some nice filtered air. And, you know, if you haven't got a self-powered respirator, and I know that they're not cheap, but, you know, it is really a joy to turn because you got fresh air being blown over your face and out through your chin area. So, you know, especially when it's hot, having that air being blown over your face certainly is a big, big help. Beep, beep, beep. So there's some nice close-ups of the surface. You know, each filling you do, the more holes you're going to fill in, the nicer the tool will glide across the surface, and the better surface you will get. Going back to the self-powered respirator, one of the knocks on them is the weight of them. Now, I'm a fairly burly guy, and I haven't got much of a neck. I played rugby and football, and 24 years in the army wearing a helmet that's a lot heavier than this. Uh, it doesn't really bother me, but I know that a lot of people, it certainly can, and I know that some people do complain about the weight. So that's one consideration if you're thinking about getting a self-powered respirator. There are a few on the market, and they all vary in price. But you know, overall in the past, you know, this has done the job for me. But you know, it's like I said, I'm going to be moving forward with something else, I think. So after a bunch of trimming and filling, I think that we're finally there. I think that we're finally ready to hit this with some sandpaper and see what it looks like. Still might have to do some filling after that, but at this stage, I prefer to start sanding. So like you see here each week, these are the 3.5-inch nipple discs from sandpaper.ca. This piece was sanded from 60 to 800 with some hand sanding along the way. The great thing about those dimple discs, and I know that I've said this in the past, since they wrap around the sanding pad, you can get it up close to the side of those beads, and it actually doesn't take away very much detail in doing so. This is one of the reasons why I really like these sanding pads, or sanding discs, not sanding pads. And by the way, the sanding disc that I am using does come from sandpaper.ca as well. So there is some actual hand sanding. I know I don't do a lot of it here on the channel. And then you'll also see me stop the lathe here. When you're working on stuff that's this wide, it is sometimes quite difficult to get the very outer edges of this sanded properly. So a lot of times when I'm dealing with stuff like this, I'll shut the lathe off, lock the headstock in place, and then just sand out those areas on the outer edges. And then once I've got it basically sanded to where I want it to be, I'll turn the lathe back on and try and blend it all in. The really wide natural edge stuff like this can be quite difficult to sand, but if you follow kind of what I'm laying out here, in the end, you'll get it. You can still see some or feel some differences in the surface. You know, as careful as you are, sometimes it's still very hard to get perfect, and you might have some dig-ins, especially on softer wood such as this butternut. This is the Triple E buffing compound from the Be All buffing system. Started in the center, worked my way out. In the end, I believe I shut the lathe off, again lock the headstock, and then polish out those resin pieces there on the end there. So, you know, the edge was sanded from 60 to 800 as well. And once these pieces are polished out, then we'll be able to clean it up with some denatured alcohol and hopefully get to our first coat finish here. For the new people, the reason why I'm using denatured alcohol is to remove all traces of buffing compound. You don't want that left behind before you put on your first coat of finish, because it may affect, it certainly will affect the adhesion of it, because it's almost like a waxy surface almost. All right, we are finally at the first coat finish. This is Waterlux Gloss. As far as the application of the finish is concerned, usually, you know, this is usually the way that I do it. But, you know, as you see, when you get to the outer edges on this, it's very difficult to maintain contact with the surface of the wood. So a lot of times I'll shut the lathe off when I'm working with pieces like this and finish them by hand. And of course, doing the edge, you're not going to do that any other way except for by hand. But I typically will do the face, the backside, and then if there's any spillage over the edge of the piece, then I will wipe that down. And that's it. Well, I'm not going to take this off because it's just too heavy. That has been a long day. That's 9.5 hours. Actually, how long I've been at this today. But it is a very neat and beautiful thing, that's for sure. We'll do another coat tomorrow. By the way, I'll throw this in my clean room, and we'll see you tomorrow. Whew. So this is in fact the next day. As you can see, I'm wearing my coat, so the fire hasn't kicked in all that great. I use a wood stove to heat with, so usually it takes a few hours for that to kick on where it's comfortable. So same process as finishing out the resin. Use the Triple E buffing compound, cut back the finish, take any lumps and bumps that may be embedded in it from dust, and then of course, because the edge has a finish on it, then you're going to use that to buff the edge as well. And just like the first time around, using the denatured alcohol to clean things up so that your next coat of finish goes on without any problems. Good morning. This is the second coat of Waterlux Gloss. Well, let me get my GoPro and I'll be able to show it from this angle, because it's just, I can't take this off and show you guys. It's just too large. All right, so just so everybody knows, this morning when I came out and I looked at the piece, you could tell where there were some little holes that had to be filled. A lot of times it's very hard to see that when you're working with pieces like this until the first coat of finish goes on. And so I noticed it this morning that I just wasn't happy with it. So I did a little bit of repair work on it, But you know, overall, I'm pretty happy with it. The only real issue with these kinds of things is the butternut is soft and the resin is hard. So if you have to repair the resin, then of course you have to sand it back. And there's all kinds of, you can get some dig-ins on the resin, you can get some dig-ins on the wood. So that's something you got to be really careful about. The edge, unlock this here. The edge is as good as the face is. It might even be better. Beautiful resin. And the back side is done the same as the front. It's important to seal both sides of something like this so that you don't have any issues in the future. Well, limit how many issues you could have in the future. But it is a beast, to say the least. And yesterday, you know, I was down on energy, but you know, this here is, again, is way up there in coolness and way up in there in uniqueness. Very, very difficult to work with. There's no kidding there. This is something for probably an advanced turner. It is a very tough thing to master, especially something that's this large. All right, if there is a third if there's a third coat, which there probably will be, I will do it the same. And then we'll see you hopefully tomorrow to finish the bottom. Look at that right there. Look at that chatoyance. She's a beauty. See you tomorrow. So to demonstrate the power of vacuum, I figured that I would use the vacuum system here, the vacuum chucking system, to remove the faceplate and the waste block. Now my initial thought was that I would just pull the screws out of the faceplate and then I would use my cut-saw sander in my grinder and just basically turn the lathe on slow speed and grind that away. And I said, no, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to use the 5/8 bowl gouge, and albeit very, very light cuts, I actually turned it, and it actually turned quite nicely. You'll see a little bit later on that as you get down smaller, I do find that it's a lot harder to get a really smooth cut without it jumping around, and I just didn't want to tempt fate, if you will. But this will demonstrate to you how powerful these vacuum systems are, and the larger the chuck you have, the more vacuum you can pull. I gave this one a really good tug and it didn't come off, so that gave me a lot of confidence to move forward to actually, you know, get rid of it with the gouge, and then, like I said, finish it up with the sander like I am right here. The sander actually worked really nice. I did stop short of the glue because I don't want the glue to clog up the cut-saw sander. But once we were down to just the glue, then I switched back to the gouge and finished it up. As far as sanding is concerned on the bottom, I just went to 320, 60 to 320. There was no resin really on the bottom of this piece, so I figured that that was more than enough so that we can get our signature on there and a coat of finish on the very base of this beautiful wall hanging. So this is the way that I've determined that this is going to sit. I want this to be the top hanging on the wall. So what I'm going to do is flip this over and I'll show you how we're going to mount this piece. Now I'm just eyeballing this. You know, I debated on hanging this a number of ways, and I also debated hanging it like this, which I think would be kind of cool looking as well. But for me, I think that I want it to be like this when it's mounted on the wall, so that's why I'm mounting it this way. But really, I don't know if there is a right or a wrong way to hang a piece like this. I'm just going to eyeball this because I don't really know any other way to really do this. I might go further out. Yeah, maybe I'll go to about here-ish, something like that. This is what I'm going to be using to hang this. This is 18 gauge galvanized steel, and what I've done is taken 3 strands of this, mounted one end of my vise and then the other in the drill, and just braided them together like so, and that should give us plenty of strength. Even though this is a large piece, this is actually only 10.5 pounds. That's all this is. So, you know, it goes to show you that a lot of times these softer woods are really hard to cut clean. So, but it's quite light, so that certainly helps us out here. So this should be plenty. I think I'll be able to double this over twice, and I don't think there's any worries about this ever breaking. There. That isn't going anywhere. Before we talk about this, I wanted to talk about the last week's giveaway. So, you know, it's happening again. What is happening is the scammers are replying to your comment. And they're saying, text this number or call this number, and, you know, for your free gift. You know, I've said it here 1,000 times that I don't do my draws that way. The name is announced, the winner, I show it on the screen who wins the bowl. I will never ask you for shipping. Ever will I ask money from you if you win a bowl. I mean, the whole idea of you winning the bowl is that you win it and you don't have all these conditions attached to it. So what they're doing is replying to your comment, and what I would like for you to do is, if you see that, there's 3 dots to the right, click on those 3 dots, and then you'll be able to report it as spam. And as soon as you do that, YouTube will go in and remove all of those comments that they put up. I'm finding this draw was probably one of the worst, and I'm still getting emails from people. There's probably been about 30 people that have emailed me saying, you know, is this a scam? And some people, did I really win? No, like I will announce it here on YouTube, and if you don't see it being announced by me, you didn't win the bowl. I'm sorry, but that's just the way that it works. But anyway, thanks to those who have sent me those emails. I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll be able to get these people and put an end to this. But, you know, it's just the world that we live in. Anyway, let's talk about this project here. So this ended up being 26 inches across, 24 inches tall here, around there, and it's just shy of 1.5 inches in thickness. Now I'm happy with this piece from here inward. 3 coats of the Waterlux gloss, but you know, I had to do some aggressive sanding on the outside of this, so I'm thinking that the outside of this just needs another coat, and then it will all blend in perfectly. But as per normal, I'm out of time. The great thing about Butternut is that it's light. So this piece is only 10.5 pounds in weight. So, you know, if this was maple, it would be 20-25 pounds in weight, somewhere around there probably. Certainly a lot heavier than 10.5 pounds. But that's the great thing about Butternut. It's actually a very light species, and the great thing about it is if you got a really large salad bowl, when it's full of salad, it's easy to pass around the table as well. So it's too bad it's a protected species here, because it is truly a beautiful wood. Having a really hard time getting video of this, so what I'm going to do to show this off is I'm going to mount it back on the vacuum chuck, and I'll do some slow rotating footage of it. Hopefully you can get the lighting right on it so it'll give you a good look at this piece, because it really is a beautiful piece. So this is going to be going into our personal collection. However, if the right offer comes along, I probably will sell it. So if you're interested in this piece, send me an email to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com. And if you give me the right offer, I guess I'll have to sell it. That's how I'm going to work it. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this 2-video series on this. I'd like to maybe do bigger and better things with this kind of stuff in the future, but we'll have to see how that goes. Next week is going to be a gigantic maple burl, and it's going to be a really thick beast. So I'm not going to give too much away, but it is a beautiful turning. I'm quite a ways into it, and it is actually very, very beautiful. So please come on back for that. It's something that we haven't done yet. So come on back and check that out. All right, well, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed the videos. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. And hey, that thumbs up certainly helps as well. See you next week.